Okay, so here we are to wrap up Reel 2 with cylinders. So I am on page 95 of this catalog, which closes October 29th, Saturday. And we're starting with lot number 6787. This particular series from 6787 down through 6820 all came in one group, and they all came basically from one original owner, one family. And this is a really cool selection of cylinders. First of all, they are all early Columbia brown wax in the red, white, and blue Columbia Liberty Statue boxes. So that's nice. They're all in boxes are all pretty clean. Some of them have lids, some of them don't. Those that have lids very often have lids that actually match the cylinders inside. Some of them actually have labels. Like here is a talking record, H.B. Cubison Manufacturing Jewelers in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Dealer sticker glued to the outside of the box here, and that's the original cylinder inside. So that's where most of these things came from. So that's the part of the country they're from. They are all Columbia recordings, every single one of them. And they are all brown wax, dating 1898. I think these were all New York and Paris as well. Yeah, these are all New York and Paris announcements. So Columbia went through a series of different announcements, which are very convenient for dating cylinders. So these all date between 1898 and 1900. And the interesting thing about them is that many of them have home recordings on them. So this was a family who loved to play with their phonograph, and that makes these a lot of fun. So you will hear the regular selection. Occasionally you might hear a little bit of a home recording leading up to the announcement. But on a good number of them, you will hear home recordings following the selection. And sometimes these guys, they didn't like to waste any space at all. So like right over the last note of the selection, they start their home recording. And they are totally random comments. I mean, and I don't have the best hearing in the world, so I blew out my hearing shooting on a rifle team for 7 years, so I don't hear necessarily what other people hear. But they are not terribly indistinct. It's just sometimes hard for me to pick certain things up. But I can catch a lot of them, and it's just like comments, like just totally off the wall comments, like you would call to somebody in the other room. Hey, you got the whatever widget or whatever. I mean, just weird stuff, and there seem to be messages like, "Hey, Mary, such and such or whatever." You know, it's like, what did they make the recording expecting somebody's going to come along and now listen to it and answer the question or respond in some way? It's just kind of weird. So I don't really know what to make of all these. And if somebody who has a better year and maybe some equipment to kind of clean up some of this, can get these things and transfer all this stuff, we can figure out something it's about. Maybe it's code. Maybe this is, maybe it's not all it actually seems to be. Who knows? But that's one of the things that makes these early brown wax cylinders an awful lot of fun. The nice thing about these is there isn't a whole lot of mold on them. If you look through the catalog, there is some light mold spots here and there. But by and large, these things are in really nice shape. So you see a few little mold spots. Let's see what this one looks like. See, that's pretty clean. For brown wax cylinders, these are nice, clean recordings. There's a little bit mold on that side. But not what you would normally expect to find. Even the ones that have the cotton lining still in the box are generally in really nice shape. Now these over here, I think, are some that were not so great and may not even be in the listing. I don't know. Let's see what this is. It's been a while since I looked at these. Yeah, so these are actual home recordings without being on commercially issued cylinders. So this, for instance, is a woman singing not very well and a man playing what sounds to be a harmonica. This one is starts out "Ladies and Gentlemen," plays at 160 RPM, which indicates that it was into the era where they were actually doing gold molded 2-minute wax cylinders that were playing at 160. So that's what their machine was already set at. and it has 3 tracks on it. The interesting thing about this is it is a short little cylinder. Unfortunately, this isn't, I don't think, one of the production short cylinders, the little cuff cylinders that you sometimes find. This looks like it's actually been maybe cut down from a larger cylinder, but still, very cool. Originally that way from the owner, so there you have it. Few additional lids to go with some of the other boxes. So that's what we're looking at. I'm selling these cylinders individually, but I also have a lot bid. If you want to bid on the whole tray in one shot, that's lot number 6821 for $1,000. Whoever gets that, if somebody gets that, will also get the box that they came in. Now, they were actually in more than one box, or more than one container. This was the only original container that came with it, but they wouldn't all fit in here. So we see it. This says on it, Columbia records are the best. It's kind of very small print at the top. Talking machine cylinders, fragile, handled with care. Looks like maybe G.R. Dufford, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Get that, Jack?
It's pretty sweet.
The box isn't in great shape. The lid's taped up around the edges, and it's seen some use. But it's nice because it tells you where the records came from. I mean, you don't often get provenance with home recordings, so that's important. That tells you who the family was, what region of the country this was done in. So just looking through here, and I'm actually not going to pull all these out, but there are a couple of significant records. And here's lot number 6817, Cal Stewart. Uncle Josh Weathersby comments upon the Spanish question and the victories at Manila and Santiago. We will probably play this on the Bitter Request show. And he sings Yankee Doodle at the end, but instead of Yankee Doodle, he sings Yankee Dewey came to town on Uncle Slam's. I'll just read it. Why don't we do that? Yankee Dewey came to town on Uncle Sam's flotilla. So it's just a recast of the song based on the Spanish-American War there. And then after that selection, then the home recording is a couple of women come right in on Stewart's last note doing Uncle Josh laughs of their own. And I think one of them shrieks, and I don't know. It's just weird stuff. But that cylinder in and of itself, even without the home recording, is a rare cylinder. So I've got a $500 minimum bid on that. That's the rarest single commercial brown wax cylinder that we have in this particular auction. We also have Uncle Josh Weathersby at the Stock Exchange, Wall Street, New York City. That's got a $250 minimum bid on it. That one does not have a home recording attached to it. But really, the home recordings actually add value to these things. They do not subtract. So that's just a really cool selection. I think somebody's going to have a lot of fun with. And we'll play a couple of these on the show. So let's get this out of the way and then look at our next group. Now don't step on these, Jack. All right? I'm putting these down over here, okay? So pay attention to that.
I'm not going anywhere near that.
All right, so the next thing we have, let's just bring this box of miscellaneous 2-minute wax out.
I wear size 11, so I tend to step on everything.
Okay, well, I wear 9.5, so I only step on about 95% of what Jack steps on.
Yeah, I think that's what 9.5 means.
Okay, so these are just individually lotted miscellaneous brown wax cylinders that you will have an opportunity to bid on in the catalog. I'm not going to go into any of that. There are a couple of interesting things. There's a consolidated cylinder. Those are pretty scarce. And there is U.S. Phono Company of New Jersey, an Isler's Orchestra piece, and a couple of unknown things. But anyway, you'll see that when you get the catalog. And then our next lot is 6845. Let's put this aside and look at 6845. Okay, so these are very cool. I have had these for many years, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 years, something along those lines. And they've been sitting in one of my cylinder cabinets back there on pegs. And I took them out of the original boxes that they came in to just put them in the cabinet so there wouldn't be any likelihood that they would get molded. But I retained the lids with them. Now these are not the original lids that came with these cylinders, and the only reason I know that is because at least one of these lids says okay, so here this one says homemade record talking of World's Fair St. Louis ? So if this had been the original family, they would have known what this World's Fair was all about. So the fact that it's got a question mark after it indicates that some collector on the line, along the line who picked up this group of cylinders hand wrote these labels for the lids. But it looks like it's been done some time ago. I mean, this wasn't done yesterday, so who knows how far back that goes. But the cool thing about this is that it starts off, well, it actually starts off pretty early, but in the catalog, we'll begin with the first cylinder, which is Happy New Year 1905. So here we have homemade record New Year's Party 1905. Here we have another one from 05, 06, 06, 07, 08. Then we have something dated December 25th, 1910. So we have a Christmas record there. 1911 New Year's Party, 1912 New Year's Party, and then a couple more home recordings. So I wish these guys had really been a little bit more interesting in terms of their New Year's saying. There was a lot of noisemakers and a lot of hoo-ha and Happy New Year's in 1900 whatever and all that business. Not a whole lot of deeper substance, unfortunately, like, hey, I hope this is the year I get my sprinkler system fixed, or something along those lines.
I can't wait to see Uncle Billy come in on the Titanic.
Hey, my New Year's resolution is to get one of those new Amberolo phonographs. That would have been nice. You know, I mean, not anything quite that snazzy. At least not for that stuff. But it gets better. So let me go back to the catalog here. So we have extended family. We have a young child who reads a poem about her mother's cranberry pie for Happy New Year 1905. So that's pretty cool. And you know, we got some interesting things. Won't go through all of that. You can read it yourself. We have Just Before the Battle Mother, which is this December 25th, 1910 cylinder, sung by Mr. Frank Connor, or at least that's the way it sounds. Again, you may hear something a little different. But at the end of his selection, you hear all this screaming and cheering, presumably by his family at the end of this. And he really gets into it. And then we have a young child who may be the same guy singing Alexander, which is a coon song, also 160 RPM recording, so it's not a real early one. I don't think any of these date from before 1904, but anyway, that's a decent record as well. But the two real gems from this, which are just wonderful, are this one that I showed you, Talking of the World's Fair, and here's another one, Talking of the World's Fair, believed to be St. Louis Exposition. So again, this is just a question by the guy who wound up with these cylinders. Well, it is in fact the St. Louis Exposition, because you can tell that by what the little girl is talking about. And I can't really pick up the name. I heard the name Connor. I think I heard the name Elker, Nellie or Melly Elker.
Nellie Melba.
And the announcement, I think it's her father who announces. And he says, 6th birthday by Nellie Elker, Columbia Records. So that's a trip. And then Nellie tells us about the trip she took to the World's Fair for her birthday. And in two of these cylinders, she describes some of the things. You can look them up online and see what she was talking about. So that is really cool, because here we have an eyewitness account from a 6-year-old about the St. Louis Exposition. So anyway, that is just a really, really cool, historically significant deal. So we are not selling these individually. They're too important. I mean, if I don't get a bid for the entire lot, then yeah, maybe I'll sell them individually. But we're selling them as a group for $1,000, and there are 12 cylinders here. So really, it's not that much money per cylinder. But for somebody who's interested in history, for a World's Fair collector, and there are certainly lots of those guys, or maybe there were at one time, I don't know about anymore, but that's a prize. Okay, so let's move on to the next catalog. Let me just show you what those World Fair cylinders look like. Look at that. You cannot ask for a nicer looking brown wax cylinder than that. Especially a home recording, for crying out loud. And they're not bad home recordings. It's not like you got to really struggle to tell what they're saying. They're pretty clear. And here's the other St. Louis Exposition one by Little Nellie. A little mold on it, but nothing really bad. Nothing that's going to take away from your listening enjoyment. Okay, so let's look at what's next in the brown wax. You know, brown wax and instantaneous recordings and, you know, special stuff like that, you don't see it in every catalog. It's not that we don't have, I mean, we've got plenty to put in every catalog. It's a lot of work going through these things and figuring out what they are and getting it cleaned up and auditioning everything, finding out the titles, the artist, you know, doing the audible grading and all of that. So
yeah, it usually takes Kurt at least a week to get through a big section like this. And the whole week, Kurt's just in the room listening to...
yeah.
So, yeah, it takes a lot of work.
You know, if I was in here a week by myself with no phone, no people coming in, it wouldn't take me anywhere near that long. But yeah, it does take a while. So there are a lot of catalogs where you don't see a brown wax because I just have it. It's at the end of the catalog. By that time, I'm trying to get the thing put together and get it to the printer. As it was with this auction, we were 3 weeks late getting it to the printer. But at least I was just determined to get some of this knocked out because we got a lot of brown wax back there, much of which I have never heard. I have any idea what it is. So it's a lot of fun going through brown wax cylinders because you never know what you're going to find. All right, so lot number 6846, which comes right after the lot we just looked at, are 9 brown wax home recordings unrelated to the previous lots. Whereas the previous lots were all in those red, white, and blue Columbia boxes, these are all in the orange Edison brown wax boxes. These are heavily molded, as you can see. That one perhaps is one of the better ones. And I wrote down what it is on each one simply because the information was written on the boxes. And so I just transcribed what it said on the boxes. And you can hear them saying something like that, you know, in the recording, but they're noisy. So I just described those as all moldy, minimum bid $15 for the 9 cylinders, and, you know, shave them down and use them yourself if you can't understand what they are. But at least you get the boxes. The boxes are worth $15 for 9 of those boxes. So there you have it. All right. So that leaves us... only one more thing that I want to show.
So there's this one on the floor. Did you already do that one? On this side?
Oh, no, we didn't do that one. Thank you,
So
John.
2 more things.
See, I only pretend to know that I don't know what I'm doing around here. I'm only acting like I'm not totally with it because I'm training Jack to maybe take this place over, maybe sooner rather than later. So he's got to step in and help me out, and in doing that, maybe over here on this side of the table one of these days. So I don't know who you're going to have on the camera because we don't have a better camera operator in here. So maybe you'll have to do double duty. All right, so these look like brown wax cylinders, and in fact, they are brown and they are wax, or at least as much wax as they have in them. But these are molded brown wax, and I don't mean molded as in mold.
They look fine to me.
But mold is then, they were poured, the materials poured into a metal mold to make the cylinder, as opposed to your earlier brown wax, most of which was uh, dubbed or pantographed from master cylinders. And so your molded cylinders typically are stronger, louder, and more durable recordings. A harder wax material as well that holds up better. And a way you can tell those, Edison didn't do uh, the molded brown cylinders. When they came up with the gold molded process, and you see that on the boxes, it says gold molded, MOULDED, uh, those were black right from the beginning. But Columbia transitioned into the molded process with the brown wax. They went for a period with just brown, and then they started the black. And you can tell a brown wax molded cylinder from an early brown wax cylinder because on the edge you will see, can you get that, Jack?
Hold it.
So you see here we got Columbia Records,
Mm-hmm.
a record. We have a title. We'll have typically an artist or a selection type. We'll have a number. That's probably the number. And you'll see the take number that follows that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that information is more like hand scratched rather than like you're seeing it on this cylinder. So it can vary a little bit, but these are all made from molds and therefore technically not brown wax as we define brown wax. So brown wax, being dubs and pantographed recordings, can look brand new and may even actually be unplayed, but you don't really know what that's going to sound like because the transfer process has an awful lot to do with it. So brown wax, like instantaneous recordings, we grade orally. We do not grade it visually. Everything else in the catalog is graded visual, with the understanding that a knowledgeable collector, that an E-conditioned Berliner is going to be sounding very different from an E-conditioned Vivatonal Columbia, right? So E-condition is not how it sounds. E-condition is the way it looks visually. As a knowledgeable collector, you know what an E-condition such and such a record is going to sound like. And if the Columbia happens to be grainy, then we'll note that it's grainy, and you'll know, okay, so I'm going to have some surface noise on this E-conditioned Columbia. But if we say this record is clean, you can expect it to be pretty quiet. So that's kind of the way it goes. So brown wax, typically, the early brown wax, we grade on a scale of 1 to 10. We don't use the letter grades. I guess we don't use 10 just like we don't use M. So it's actually 1 to 9 as it is P to M minus for 78s. So yeah, that's a pretty good range there. If you are bidding on a brown wax cylinder that says it's a 5, then you're going to hear about equal parts surface noise to recorded content. So that doesn't mean that it's a terrible cylinder. You're going to be able to hear it. You may not understand it all if it's spoken word. You may not pick up all the lyrics in a song, but it should still be recognizable and somewhat enjoyable. You start getting below 5, it's going to get harder and harder to really pick up anything. You get up into the 8s and 9s, and now you're starting to hear things that were probably pretty close to the way the original buyer heard them on their phonograph. Very clear, may not necessarily be loud. That doesn't mean it's a loud recording, but it's a clear recording. All right, so anyway, so this whole tray is 2-minute Columbia molded cylinders. These sound very good, and I will say this. On these cylinders, when you find these, even in moldy condition, you might be inclined to just toss them in the garbage because they look really bad. Sometimes that mold is not really affecting the sound quality as you expected it might. You can put that on and you can say, wow, that's amazing. I can totally understand this cylinder. I can enjoy this cylinder. So especially on the Columbias, I think in my experience, the Edisons are not necessarily quite that discernible when they get molded, but your Columbias, both the brown and the black wax molded, can still sound pretty good. So just be aware of that. All right, now, does that take care of it, Jack? We got this as one more?
We got one more tray of cylinders, and then we're going to go to part 3.
Oh, part 3. I've been waiting for part 3.
Ooh.
Oh, can't wait for part 3. All right, so these, in the last auction, auction 71, our spring 2022 sale, we sold the 4-minute U.S. Everlasting cylinders that had come with that U.S. Everlasting opera phonograph that we talked about in the last show. And we're not going to talk about it this time because if you want to hear that, look at the Bit of Request show. Look at the Nauction highlight reel from Auction 71, posted on YouTube, and you will see all about that. And you'll see some examples of the 4-minute cylinders. Well, these are the two. So we sold the 4-minute last auction. We're selling the 2 minutes this time. As I mentioned at that time, it appears to me that the phonograph and the cylinders have always been together from the beginning. They were all probably given to someone in some kind of a special presentation because the machine is a unique machine. There's no other like it. It's a mahogany case with a tiger stripe oxidized bronze bed plate and fittings. Very nice, like an Edison Idealia. Exquisite phonograph. Two 4-minute reproducer on the top, like a U.S. Everlasting often has, and basically didn't really appear to be used. And these cylinders, look at the boxes. You can see a little staining on the lid, which is normal from either light or dust or coal dust or whatever in a home. But these are remarkably clean. If I just pick one out, look at the boxes. Where do you see that clean boxes?
Here.
I mean, they're just beautiful. Well, not always here, but in this box here for sure. And these are just beautiful cylinders. Look at that. I mean, I know it looks nice because we are in a room with nice light shining on it and everything, but it looks just as good elsewhere. I would guess that these are probably unplayed, to be honest with you. At least most of them. I think that whoever was given this this setup, probably at this point, because we have 4-minute cylinders, so we know that this was done at least in after 1908. By that time, this guy probably had a Victor in his parlor, and he was invested in disc technology. Somebody gave him this stuff, and he wasn't going to listen to cylinders, so this probably just got boxed up, put in a closet, and forgotten about. And that's why these cylinders are so nice. It's purely speculation on my part, but it makes sense. So anyway, we could sell these as a lot, but I know that they're going to be expensive, just as the 4-minutes were. It would have been taken a very high individual bid to have purchased that entire lot of 4-minutes, as it would this one as well. If you want these bad enough to take them all, that's fine. You can give me a huge number, and I'll put it on the whole group of them. But be advised that each of these has a $25 minimum bid, if I'm not mistaken. And they will sell either for that on up from there. It would not surprise me if there are individual records in this group that would sell for over $100. So that's that. Jack, I think we have covered all the records in this catalog. Why don't you pan up to the top of this shelf here, and let's just take a look briefly at the books. Now, the way we have these set up for us to pull them is such that we can see the lot numbers, so we don't really see the titles. And I'm not going to pull them down, but there's a lot of discographies up here that you are going to have a hard time finding elsewhere. We talked about the 4-volume Charles Gregory set of the Edison Diamond Disc labels. I think the one that I really want to draw attention to is this one right here. This is a scarce book. It was sold in a limited edition when it came out. This was written by a guy who was actually working for the company. He may have even have been the archivist. But this is His Master's Voice in America. In other words, the gramophone company in England and their business here in the United States and so forth. It's a really nice book. 90 Years of Communications Pioneering in Progress. Victor Talking Machine Company, Radio Corporation of America, and then later became General Electric Company. And I don't know if these were serial numbered. Perhaps not. But Fred Barnum was the guy who wrote this. And I got a chance to buy my copy of this directly from him at one of the Bilton music box shows back in the early 90s. But this was a big deal. This was Here's Fred here. This was sanctioned by, I guess it was General Electric at the time. And this is the history of the Victor Talking Machine Company. So you see we got some record labels pictured, stationery. Here's some artist photos, pictures of the 4 different sizes, 8, 12, 10, and 7. I mean 14, 12, 10, and 7.
The image there on the left, that's the one that we put on that we had Joe Wood put on the Greatest Hits CD, isn't it?
Oh, this?
Mm-hmm.
No. Well, if he may have gotten a little bit of inspiration from that, but no, the one that we had the horns. This has more like wings. Mm. But yeah, so the 8-inch size is left out of this picture. But anyway, pictures of the factory, the various buildings. Here's the tower with the Nipper stained glass window in it. Here are radios when it became RCA Victor and the big merger with them. So anyway, just a really cool book. And this, I think this has a $250 minimum bid on it. It was not cheap when it was sold originally, so you're going to have to pay for that if you want it, but it's worth having. All right, and everything else up here you can just look at in the catalog to get an idea what that's all about. So that takes care of everything in Auction 72 except the gem quality section. So we are going to shut down reel number 2 and kick back up with reel number 3 momentarily.